Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure to interview Angela Taylor-George. Angela is the founder of trend-setting multi-brand showroom Times2 and renowned New York label Alice and Trixie. She's an entrepreneur, fashion designer, creative director, and author. Hailed early as the voice of authority by New York Daily News, Angela has made an indelible mark on the fashion industry internationally for over 4 decades, playing a vital role in the co-creation and launch of major fashion trends widely copied today and originating designs still cherished and traded around the world. When not in pursuit of the next big fashion trend, she's designing interiors, snapping artsy pics with her trusty iPhone, and of course, eyeing her next travel destination. Angela resides in New York City and East Hampton, New York, with her adorable rescue pup, Chloe. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So to start things off, can you please share with our listeners a little bit about your background and your current projects that you spend your time on?
So my background is, I've always been in fashion since I was a kid. I actually write about it at the age of 10, I had my first fashion fix, which was a pair of hot pants. On from there, I worked in retail, and I started retail at the age of 16, working on the selling floor. But then I had some fits and starts before I kind of went back to retail. I can say I'm a beauty school dropout. I'm an acting school dropout. I'm a college dropout. But fashion was always in my blood. So after I, had fits and starts and other things, I went back to fashion. So a few years, really when I was 19 years old, and I started to go to FIT at night. And I grew up in New York, and so I was working in Manhattan, and that was, I was working on the retail selling floor for a number of years. I became a manager and then buyer, and I did that for like 13 years. I was in retail for 13 years, and then I started a showroom, wholesale showroom for fashion brands, 1989, and I did that for 10 years. So this was all pre-internet, before, the only way to get to retail was to open your own store, print your own catalog, or sell wholesale to retail stores. So I was a liaison between the brand and the retailer in my showroom. So I had a sales and marketing agency called Times2. And then in 97, I started my own fashion brand called Alice and Trixie, which I had for 22 years. Again, just all in New York, designed in New York, made in New York. And we distributed that internationally through wholesale channels and direct to consumer.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I'm excited to dive in and ask some questions. And so before we get into any questions, you had mentioned prior to the taping of the show, you have a Firing the Man story. So I wanted to ask you if you can share your Firing the Man story with the audience.
I'd be happy to. It was such a great day. I was working retail, and I was a buyer at the time. And I worked for these two brothers, which will remain nameless. It was like a good cop, bad cop situation. But I remember I had asked for a raise, and the nice brother seemed like it was going to be like a good, it was going to be okay. And then the mean brother, he decided that he was incensed by the fact that I would even think they weren't paying me enough money. He actually took offense to the fact that I was asking for a raise. And in that moment, I was like, that was my moment. I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, boom, right on the spot. I quit. And that was it. And then I went and started my own company. So it was a crazy, because it just happened, and it wasn't anything that was premeditated. I was asking for a raise, and the next minute I quit, and, off I am in my entrepreneurship journey. So that's my story.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like that. Whenever they second guessed your worth, you were like, I don't think so, I'm out. So that's cool. You had mentioned, starting, founding, and growing Alice and Trixie. Can you share with the listeners your top 3 lessons learned from growing the brand?
Absolutely. I think, I actually have more than three, but I'll dive in. I think number one, you have to have product market fit. You have to know your customer. And if you don't know your customer, that is the number one thing I think in any business. You have to know your customer. And then you have to have a product that aligns with what that customer needs, wants, and will actually pay for. So that's like the first thing. I would say always be evolving. I think that's really important, that you can never stay complacent. And especially in fashion, that's my background, my roots. You can, with things are always changing, you have to really be evolving. But then I'm going to contradict myself, but there are times when you need to lean in and know that you're milking an item, like you're onto something, and you need to lean in and kind of amplify what that is that people are wanting, finding new ways to give it to them, maybe more colors, or you need to know how to evolve, because some people will just like have an item and then they're just like, well, we're done, we're sold out, and then they move on with life. And it's that whole 80-20 rule that you will do 80% of your business on 20% of your styles. So when you get something that's a hit, you really want to be able to lean in and evolve that, how can you evolve that style? So that's really important. So knowing when to back off and when to lean in. I think the biggest thing is innovation. You have to be innovating. As for myself, I was a 22-year-old brand, and, I got to a point where I wasn't innovating at, and I write about it in my book, where I really take people through like my whole entrepreneurial journey and really what that was like, and what, where you need to be evolving, where you need to constantly be in, speaking to your customers. It's another big lesson. You got to be in contact with your customers to really hear things firsthand, what their experience is of the brand, what they want, what they don't want, and things like that. And again, never be, I'm just repeating myself at this point, but I think innovate, very important, especially for a legacy, a brand that's been around for a while. You need to, because what happens is, in my case, like there's like a cycle through of like, you have certain customers that have grown with your brand over the years, other customers that were like, you were a moment in time and now they're on to the next brand. And then you have new people coming in. So, it's like, it's a delicate balance to be, kind of being the right thing for all those audiences. So those would be my tips.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, you've talked about selling direct to consumer. You've also talked about selling wholesale. And I would imagine there's quite a few differences between that. And so can you talk about some of the primary differences and how maybe your marketing strategy would differ between wholesale and direct to consumer?
Absolutely. Well, obviously, when you're doing wholesale, your pricing, you probably have to, it's depending on, I don't know, who's listening, the businesses you're in, but in fashion, I would say if you take the retail and, it's a general rule of thumb, again, nothing ground in stone, but, if you divided like your retail divided by 2.2, think about that should be your wholesale price. So, you have to be able to, number one, have the margin in your retail. If you've been a direct to consumer brand, you want to make sure that the margins are built in to be able to sell wholesale. Wholesale, the calendar is very different. They're buying things, 3-6 months in advance, 9 months in advance sometimes. So you have to have a collection ready very early on. Whereas when you're direct to consumer, it's like, okay, it's, August, we're going to start putting some fall stuff on the website. Whereas like the stuff that's in August, you would have had to have sold to the retailers back in February, and your collection would have to be ready. So that means you would have to have been designing it for maybe 3 months before that. So you're kind of always working like almost a year in advance practically. So that's a very big difference when you're working with, going from a wholesale to direct to consumer. That's a huge difference. And then obviously I think wholesale, you want to be able to be selling stores that align with your brands, right? I think I'll say one of the good things about wholesale, especially for a newer direct to consumer brand, is that if you sell to a certain store, that can kind of brand you. Like in fashion, for instance, if you have a brand and you're able to get it into, say, and I don't recommend this for a new brand, but I'm just to illustrate my point. If you're able to, get it into like because people would know Neiman Marcus, we say, okay, Neiman Marcus, that's a luxury retailer. If your brand is there, well, your brand must be good too because you're a Neiman Marcus. So it's almost like the company that, the retailer that you're selling to can help brand you as a new brand. So that's a good thing about, selling wholesale. And then I think, one of the other things is, I think I'm a big fan of like a, like this omni-channel hybrid approach of having key retailers in certain areas. And again, if you're a new e-commerce brand, I would say go with boutiques. Like you don't want to be messing with department stores or, anything like big box, whatever. don't even go there when you're brand new. You want to be finding boutiques, like searching out the boutiques that you feel have your customer base and selling in those boutiques. So that way you have a presence where people can go see, feel, and touch the product, and then they can come to your website to buy it online. Those are some of there's more, but those are just some of the differences, I think, between the two.
Now, for the brands that are starting out in D2C, what do you think are some of the things that they miss out on completely?
Well, I feel like it's a lot, because I think because of the internet, it's, in digital, it's the good news and the bad news. It's like the barrier to entry is so low. It's the good news, but it's also the bad news, because anybody that has a half-baked idea that they thought about in their, bedroom pops up a website or tries to get an Amazon store. And I think that's the problem, why there's so much like Me Too product out there. There's a lot of, very similar offerings in the marketplace. And I think that is an issue. And it's not to say that you have to be a unicorn and you have to reinvent the wheel and you have to be Uber and you like whatever. I'm not saying that, but you can take a category and make a change to a category, where I'm saying, okay, now we're not doing razors anymore. We're doing, something else that we use to shave. It's like, obviously it's a razor, but if you look at like what Dollar Shave Club, whatever, okay, they did a subscription service. Yeah, they created something new within the category. So I think that's what entrepreneurs should be looking for. How can I bring newness to a category? How can I do something that hasn't been done in a category that's relevant and important? So I think it's back to the question of the mistakes. I think that people don't do competitive research. They don't really understand the market they're entering into. They're just having an idea and just like, popping up and trying to get an Amazon store or do some drop shipping or whatever they're doing without really having a full understanding of the landscape in which they've entered and are playing in at this point. The Me Too business is like, to me, it's the big problem. I think Me Too is fine, but like Me Too, but it's XYZ. Me Too, but it's ABC. That's okay. But too many people are coming in. And then the other thing is branding. If you don't really understand branding, how are you branding yourself? A lot of times with these like Amazon sellers, it's like kind of a race to the bottom in price. It's not really building a brand. And the thing, and I don't know if the podcast is centered a lot around Amazon, but I'll say what I don't like about Amazon, I think Amazon has that big audience, but at the same time, you don't own the relationship with the customer. So that's why I think it's important to have something that goes along with that. You can be on Amazon, but have your own website, those type of things. But I don't know. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And David and I are huge fans of, utilizing Amazon as a sales channel and selling direct as well. So you can get that email and you can kind of own that. And so now, Angela, you've got a lot of experience with wholesale as well as some direct to consumer. Speaking from the point of a business owner, brand owner, what are those sales channels do you prefer in terms of, you had mentioned some pros and cons, with the wholesaling piece, you can kind of get into stores and kind of spread. But in terms of profitability, the other piece is complexity. So maybe wholesale suppliers are hard to work with, or maybe you don't get as much cash in. So D2C or wholesale, what are as a business owner and profitability, what is your favorite channel?
D2C, I think is hands down, but I do think, and I think that should be like maybe say 75% of your business, but I think you should have some type of physical, there has been a return to retail. There has been a retail resurgence right now. Like everything was going online, and then a lot of people, and it didn't just happen. Like if you look at somebody like Warby Parker, for instance, the eyeglasses, they started out direct to consumer, and then they started opening physical stores. Bonobos started, they were not direct. Well, they were direct to consumer. Then they were. I'm just trying to remember now the Bonobo story. But when they did go to physical, they were online. And when they went to physical retail, they went after they were online. So I think there is this. People are realizing that customers need to see, feel, touch the product, and it's also good for branding. It's like for branding, for brand awareness. It's good for marketing as well to have a physical store. I think as a brand, it helps you as a brand, and it opens up, new customer acquisition channel with the retail. But yes, I think I do like direct to consumer. I'm not a big fan of wholesale, only to the point where it's strategically placed in areas. And it can also help you to see that, when you do sell to certain stores, that, these stores have certain sell-throughs and stuff, and it can help you that maybe one day you're going to want to have a store in that area because certain regions are doing well, that kind of thing. I would say direct to consumer would be if you had to, like, if I've had a gun to my head and you said wholesale or direct to consumer, I'd say direct to consumer.
Fair enough. And I do like your hybrid approach of having a little bit of wholesale for the exposure, maybe the market research piece of it. I like that.
Thank you. Yes, I like it too.
Very nice. So if an e-commerce entrepreneur wants to make that step to open a retail store, what are your recommended steps?
I would say go to your heat map and see where your stores are, where your consumers are. Where your consumers are. That's what I would do. I would, if you have a lot of people in Florida and Miami or in Los Angeles or New York or Austin, Texas, wherever, I would think that would be a good place to have a retail store And why do I think that? Because I think, number one, you already know that you have a client base there. You can also increase the lifetime value of those clientele that can come, and also, it was funny. I can't take credit for this because I was speaking to my friend Brian, he has a menswear brand, Teddy Stratford, direct to consumer. Something he brought up that I didn't think about because we'd been talking about this recently. And he said what he liked about it was also that because of the returns, that it would minimize the returns because people would, they would be able to come and try the stuff on. So there's no need to, buy the wrong size or that kind of thing. So, and we know returns is it's a huge problem with direct to consumer, with online brands. It's a huge problem. So the fact if you could offset some of those returns, I definitely think that anything that does that is also a help as well.
One thing I want to point out to our listeners is that in terms of the geographical location of the store, Angela did not say where you live. It's where your customers live. And I think that that's something that we see a lot of I can speak to small town Missouri where we see retail stores go up and within 6 months it's going to be shutting down. It just is not going to make it. And so I think that's a really practical and really good recommendation.
So another question, Angela, and this probably falls in line with a little bit with the last one, the wholesale versus the direct to consumer. Can you go through some of the benefits of owning a retail store versus an online store, pros and cons of each?
I would say, the retail store, it's that physical, that IRL experience with the customer, seeing the customers. And that's what I loved being on the retail selling floor. I talk about that a lot in my book. I loved seeing something sell out. I loved seeing the customer trying things on. I loved, you can see firsthand, like you can see different body types. You can see how the merchandise looks on people. You can see what they're complaining about. Like I was in a store recently in Rag & Bone and I tried on a jacket and then one size didn't fit and another one didn't fit because it seemed like it was two sizes. Like the shoulders were one size and the waist was another. And they had said, oh yeah, customers had been complaining about that. Like that's a definite fit issue. And if you're online and you don't know that and customers are just returning things, you have no idea why it's being returned. You're not able to, fix your pattern, fix your production. If in this case, you probably wouldn't be cutting it again, but it's a missed opportunity because I love the style that I tried on, but it had a fit issue. So, it's something to be able to see, what the customers are saying about something. So I think that physical experience, IRL, being with the customer, that's what I love about physical retail. And also the other thing I love about physical retail is that you can bring the experience of your brand into the four walls. Like this is the world of XYZ brand, whatever it is. And that I think that helps to build the awareness, helps to build the brand affinity when they can walk in and they've walked into an environment that is yours. This is my world, So I think, and we know, emotion is very important when it comes to selling. It's all about emotion. This is how people buy based on emotion. So when you're able to be in that physical space with the merchandise, with the people that are buying, I think that's when you can feel that energy. That's so important.
Yeah, I think especially for fashion, when like you had mentioned, the return rates are like sky high. And so people want to try the clothes on and see in a physical retail store, you can have that. And as well as, getting into the market research again, or not even research, but feedback, direct feedback. You said, hey, if something's not fitting right, we can kick that down to the production, or whatever, and make changes on the fly. And so a lot of good stuff can come out of a retail store. And things in terms of like profitability and not. Like, the expense of a retail store is considerably higher than an online store. But I think one of the pros would be getting that direct feedback, especially if you have a fashion brand, clothing, something like that, where fit and feel, that is crucial, versus selling online where there's a gap there still.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing I wanted to say about that, and I just want to say this because I think also you need to, and anybody who's contemplating a retail store, I think it's really important to kind of have all your numbers, because you don't want to, you can end up going somewhere and taking a bath because you didn't do your numbers. You have to look at the rents, what you're paying for rent, for staffing, for insurances, for, everything, the build out, this, that, the other. And then you really have to look and say, well, how many of whatever you're selling, how many do I have to sell? Like, how, what does my volume need to be annually in order for it to make sense? And I think a lot of people just they'll open a store without really knowing the numbers. And I think that is so important when you realize, well, I need to sell 7,525 of these every 6 months. I don't think that's going to happen, whatever. So, in order to be profitable. So I think it's really important to really, really look at the numbers. And the other thing is, but you also, and again, if you are looking at it as a marketing expense, you want to know that too. I'm you know what? I live in Soho, New York City, right? There are many stores down here in Soho, and I know they pay very high rents. I've been part owner in a retail location myself, and they pay very high rents. But they're fine with it because they're well, it's marketing. We're going to pay all these high rents, but this is part of our marketing budget. So, I'm thinking the listeners that maybe don't have that kind of, these, I'm talking about big brands, big, huge brands. So, but that's something to consider as well. Because if it's not a marketing budget, you really need to do your math and make sure that you're going to be able to, sell enough to pay for all the expenses.
Absolutely. Now, I would like to dive into your new book titled Hot Pursuit, A True Tale of Fashion, Fortune, and Fierce Ambition in New York City. Great title, by the way. Can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, the book started out as a how-to. It was how to start a fashion brand was how the book started. And I started writing this book, and I started telling my own story in the beginning of the book. And, and then I kind of went into the nuts and bolts of how to start a fashion brand. And I gave it to a friend of mine. He's a 30-year marketer, and his name is Antonio White. And I was just Antonio read the book, and he got back to me and he said, I loved hearing your story. I was so engaged. And then all of a sudden, Angela, the professor, came out on the pages and is I don't want to know how to do it. He said, I want to know how you did it. So I literally, it was believe me, I was writing for a long time. And then when he said that, I was So I went back and I kind of discarded 2/3 of the book and I rewrote my whole story, which was my own journey of entrepreneurship. I've been a 3-time founder. I even had a retail store at one point in New York City. I didn't mention that. So I really went back to tell my story. But in the telling of my story, I take the readers through the New York City in the 80s and the 90s and, the aughts and 2010s. The book starts in 1970 and it comes to 2022. So it really is all about the fashion industry, all about what New York was like back in the day, all about the New York City Garment Center, when it was all the hustle and bustle and it was a very robust industry before everything went overseas. So it chronicles my journey, but it's a lot of storytelling and a lot of lessons, all the lessons baked in that I learned all along my career. So it's a fun read. A lot of people are saying it's a fun read. It's, there's bite-sized chapters and again, chock-filled. I have a Madonna story in there. I have, so I do, there's it's a lot of fun. So yeah, and I'm excited about it, and I just released it, and looking forward to where the next steps are in my journey.
Awesome. And if our listeners are interested in getting their copy, what would be the best way?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's available on my website. Hopefully you'll have the links down in the show notes. If you even go to my website, angelataylorgeorge.com, it's right there in the front, on the top. You can click the link. It's in ebook and in paperback.
Very nice. Very nice. And we will put a link to all that in the show notes. And you had mentioned before the podcast, you had a free resource for our listeners. Would you like to go through that?
Yes, I do. Anybody that's contemplating, something that they want to make in fashion, a lot of people think that it's Project Runway, whereas in Project Runway, it's they're making the pattern, they're cutting the fabric, they're sewing the fabric, they're sending it down the runway. And that is really not the way the real world works. There are professionals that do pattern making and do sewing and cutting for the designers. So my resource is really how to create a sample, but using outsourced people, like the way professionals do. I'll just say about Project Runway. I mean, Tim Gunn, I think he was the dean at Parsons, and he really, he was part of Project Runway, the success in the beginning. Now they've left the show, him and Heidi Klum, but that's the way you do it if you're at Parsons. Like, you're doing all of those things, but in the real world, if you're not preparing for your fashion runway show at school, like for your final grade, it's like, that's really not the way the world works. So my resource will help you to know how to make a first sample domestically.
Awesome. And we will post a link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you. All right, Ken, over to you for the fire round.
Absolutely. So, Angela, we run all of our guests through the ringer. It's called the fire round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What is your favorite book?
The E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber. E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. Love that book. Great for any entrepreneur. Every entrepreneur needs to read it. I've mentioned that specifically for your listeners.
Awesome. Thank you. What are your hobbies?
I love to take pictures with my iPhone, actually. I love to go vintage shopping. I love traveling. Interior design. I love doing interior design, actually.
What is one of your favorite places that you've traveled to?
The Greek islands. Yeah,
What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
I don't miss having to do it their way, because I feel like I actually had one boss who told me, you can't work for anybody. You need to work for yourself, because I always wanted to do it my way. So that I don't miss having to do it their way, because I want to do it my way.
Fair enough. They can't fit you in a box, right?
No.
Hold on. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Wow. Okay. I think there are a little bit differences there with the ones that never get started. I'm going to start with them specifically, because I think they lack clarity. I think what happens is when you don't have clarity, you don't know what to do. So I think when you lack clarity and you lack, without that North Star, that goal, like if you have a GPS and you're not putting in a destination, you're not going to get anywhere. So I think clarity will help to clear the path to where you need to go so you can make that goal. So I think that's really important for somebody who's maybe struggling right now or not knowing what to do, but know they want to do something. It is about the clarity. And then one other thing I'll say about that, again, just for your listeners, it's like when you think about doing something, like think about something that you're going to want to do in the next 2, 3, 5 years. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people will go for like a money grab and then they're not happy after because they went for a money grab in the very beginning. So think about, does this have longevity for you? That is something that you're going to want to be doing. And then I think for the ones that fail, I'll be honest with you. I wrote the book because I really want to reverse the failure rate. The failure rate for new businesses is dismal. And I think a big part of it is that a lot of people today, it's like the blind leading the clueless. Like people think they can YouTube their way to success. And while YouTube has its place, it's very hard to cobble together a lot of different information and then create a game plan for yourself. So I think part of the thing is that people do need to get some hands-on experience, even if it's interning somewhere, because a lot of people are going right to this, and I think there's no shame, look, side hustling is great, but I think sometimes people are doing something without ever having any experience doing it, and they're just making it harder on themselves. So it's better to stack the cards in your favor by, going and working somewhere for a year in the business you want to be in. And then, you will have so much more information than just starting without that, or be with like-minded people or something, or tap into some type of community, or, there has to be something, I think, so I think that's part of it. And I think the biggest part of why businesses fail is that they don't have product market fit. That is the bottom line. It's like there are plenty of people out there and there's plenty of things you could be making, but if the product you're making, if you don't know who your audience is, who your customers, you're not making a product that aligns with that audience. And again, that audience needs to pay for it. And friends and family giving you a high five is not this is not the thing for success. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you need to be, great idea, but all right, well, are you going to pay me for it? It's that kind of thing. So I think it's really important to test what you're doing. I guess the last thing I'll land on is, if you have an idea, test it out, start to build a community. I think it's really important right now. because we didn't have this when I was coming up, like we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet. And I think today, we have these resources and tools that we could leverage where we could build out a community, where we could start to talk to customers. I'll just say one thing. I was mentoring a brand through an FIT program, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. They were doing something around acro yoga, but that they were enthusiasts. That's what they liked. They started an Instagram group, and the woman, the founder, the co-founder, she wanted something to wear after acro yoga that wasn't leggings. She wanted to wear something that she can go food shopping in, whatever, after she did her acro yoga practice. So she created this style, this onesie, nice, yummy fabric. And she just started, after she had 10,000 followers on Instagram, she just started, these were like-minded enthusiasts of this acro yoga. She started flirting the product, and they're still direct to consumer until this day, and they have customers, and their customer base is growing. That's one other thing I'll say is, like, also don't be a generalist. Zig Ziglar said it best. He said, be a meaningful specific, not a wandering generality. And I think that's really important to have, stand for something and have a bit of a niche. Anyway, there's more I could talk about, but I'll leave it at
No worries. Excellent answer. Very thorough. What a great way to cap off the show. So
absolutely. If people are interested in learning more about you or following your content, what would be the best way?
Okay, so I'm all over. I'm on LinkedIn, Angela Taylor George. I'm on YouTube. My channel is Haute Pursuit, the name of the book. Also Angela Taylor George. I'm on TikTok at Haute Pursuit, Instagram, Angela George, and Haute Pursuit book. So I'm everywhere you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast. We're looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having me.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?